He offered me $5 million in the divorce agreement to take away the last foundation of my family. But he didn't know that the key my father left me opened a door to the abyss that could bury his entire empire. 3 days ago, I was still the silent, docile, and decorative wife he barely acknowledged. 3 days later, I placed the irrefutable evidence of his drunk driving accident that killed a man and framed an innocent driver, quietly on the table before him and his mistress. For 3 years of marriage, he never truly looked at me. Today, I will make him understand exactly who he is about to discard. Iris arrived at the Azure Hotel just as James Liu stepped out through the main entrance to wait for her. He wore an impeccably tailored navy suit, his posture upright, his expression carrying that familiar cool detachment. He'd looked exactly the same 3 years ago when he'd first come to her family home to propose, remote and restrained, as though executing a business negotiation. "You're 7 minutes late." James glanced at his watch. His tone revealed nothing. There was an accident on the ring road. Traffic was backed up for half an hour. Iris explained, reaching out instinctively to take his arm. James shifted aside with practiced smoothness, avoiding her touch. Iris's hand hung in midair for a beat before she withdrew it, pretending nothing had happened. The tiny gesture pricked at her chest like a needle. 3 years of marriage. Over 1,000 days. James's distance had never wavered. Whether at family dinners or public events, he always maintained half an arm's length from her, as though she carried some contagious disease. But she was used to it by now. "Let's go." James turned and pushed open the banquet hall doors. Crystal chandeliers blazed, spilling light across his handsome, indifferent profile. Tonight was the Liu Group's annual charity gala. The who's who of the city's business elite were in attendance. As Mrs. James Liu, Iris had to be there. She fixed a practiced smile on her face and followed him into the glittering, perfume-scented crowd. Halfway through the evening, amid the clinking of glasses and murmured deals, Iris excused herself to the restroom. The ladies' lounge was on the east side of the banquet hall, down a quiet corridor. She stood before the mirror, touching up her lipstick and tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She was about to head back when a familiar female voice drifted from the adjacent sitting room. "Did you see what Iris was wearing tonight, James? A Vera Wang from last season. How embarrassingly cheap." Iris froze. That was Mandy Zhou's voice, James's junior from high school through college, now the Liu Group's legal counsel, and the woman who appeared at his side more often than anyone else. The rumor mill had it that if old Mr. Liu hadn't arranged the engagement between the Shen and Liu families, Mandy would have been Mrs. Liu by now. Iris stood in the shadows of the corridor, peering through the sitting room's half-open door. Mandy lounged on the sofa, a glass of red wine in hand, dressed in a champagne-colored fishtail gown. Every gesture radiated the polished ease of a woman born to money. The woman across from her laughed lightly. "Who cares what she wears, Mandy? That title, Mrs. Liu, it's going to be yours sooner or later. An out-of-season dress. She won't even be able to afford that once the divorce goes through. Don't talk nonsense." Mandy's lips curved upward even as she feigned reproach, a smug certainty flickering behind her eyes. She swirled her glass, her voice casual. "But James is getting less and less subtle. Did you notice? The whole night, he never once looked at her." Of course he didn't. Everyone knows where James's heart really lies. That woman, what does she have besides that engagement contract to hold over him? "I heard she dropped out of college without finishing. Compared to a Columbia law grad like you, she might as well be a different species." "All right, that's enough." Mandy set down her glass, her tone carrying the calm confidence of someone who already knew how the story ended. Some things belong to the people they belong to. She's had 3 years on borrowed time. That's more than enough. Iris stood outside the door, her nails digging deep into her palms. She hadn't finished college, that much was true. But not because she hadn't wanted to. 3 years ago, her family's fortunes had collapsed. Her father had fallen critically ill. She'd dropped out of her senior year to marry into the Liu family, trading her freedom for the capital infusion that kept the Shen group afloat. She'd just turned 20. She'd been a junior. James had never known. Or more precisely, he'd never cared. In his eyes, she was just a social climber who'd latched onto the Liu family through an old man's promise. For 3 years, he'd treated her with the same distant courtesy he'd show a piece of furniture, polite, present, and utterly irrelevant. Iris took a deep breath and turned to leave. But Mandy spoke again. "Oh, and James is already drafting the divorce papers." Mandy's voice dropped lower now, but every word reached Iris's ears with surgical clarity. "He said after the gala, the Liu Group's legal team will have a clean exit path for the 3-year capital injection. Iris won't get a cent. And the Shen family's remaining shares, all of them, will have to be handed back." My God. That would destroy the Shens completely, wouldn't it? That's what happens when you get greedy. Mandy's laugh was soft. Marrying into the Liu family for a bailout. There's always a price to pay. Iris didn't remember walking back to the banquet hall. Her ears rang. Her smile stayed fixed to her face like a mask, stiff, frozen, hollow. The hall was still buzzing with deals and laughter. No one noticed the pallor beneath Mrs. Liu's carefully painted features. She slid back into her seat beside James. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She turned to look at the man beside her, the man she'd shared a bed with for 3 years, who was currently leaning toward a real estate developer, murmuring something about acquisitions, his brow smooth and untroubled. Divorce. He wanted a divorce. She'd always known the marriage was a transaction. But she'd never imagined being thrown out like this, like garbage swept to the curb. She'd thought that without love, there'd at least be dignity. Mandy's words had carved that last illusion out of her chest. "You look pale." James turned his head suddenly, scanning her face. "Just a little warm in here." Iris lowered her gaze, hiding the chaos beneath her lashes. James didn't press. His attention returned to the developer. The Gala wound down with all the polished noise it had begun with. Iris sat in the back of the car on the way home, neon lights sliding across her face through the tinted windows. James sat beside her, absorbed in his phone. The silence between them was a vault of ice. "James." Iris spoke suddenly. He didn't look up. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" His thumb paused on the screen for a fraction of a second. Then he resumed scrolling. "No. You look tired. Get some rest when we get home." Iris turned her head toward the window, watching the streetlights blur past. A bitter smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. He couldn't even be bothered to tell her himself. It was past midnight when they got home. James went straight to his study. Iris retreated to the bedroom alone. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the scattered lights of the other mansions in the compound, a weight pressing down on her chest so heavy she could barely breathe. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tara Sue, her closest friend. "How was the gala? Did Mandy the fake sweetheart pull anything?" Iris stared at the screen for a long time. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally, she sent 3 words, "Long night." "I'm wiped." Tara called immediately. "You don't sound right," Tara said. "What happened?" Iris leaned against the window frame and told her everything she'd overheard. Tara was silent for a few seconds. Then she laughed, a cold, hard laugh. "I knew it. That ungrateful bastard. If you hadn't married him, the Liu Group would never have gotten the Shen family's land deal in the East District project. Now that the project's done, he wants to dump you." And that slut Mandy is helping him. Tara. Iris closed her eyes. I don't want to cause drama. You don't want to cause drama. Tara's voice jumped an octave. Listen to me. You need to start preparing right now. I know the type. If James has decided on divorce, he'll have already mapped out how to screw you on the asset split. Your dad's still in recovery. Your little brother's still in high school. If you walk away from the Liu family with nothing, what happens to the Shuns? Iris was silent. Tara was right. 3 years ago, the Shun group had been on the verge of collapse. Her father Glenn had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. The company's cash flow had dried up. Her brother Ryan was preparing for his high school entrance exams. She'd married James, the Liu group had put $30 million into the Shun group, and the family had barely survived. But $30 million wasn't a gift, it was a loan. And 3 years later, the Shun group was still limping. James choosing this moment to divorce her was like pulling the ladder out from under a drowning woman. I'll figure something out, Iris said quietly. Figure something out. You didn't even finish college. You've spent 3 years being arm candy for the Lius. Tara's words were harsh but honest. Iris. Tara. Iris cut her off. Do you remember my father's study? Tara paused. She'd grown up with Iris, spent half her childhood at the Shun house. She knew every corner of that place. Of course I remember. The study where Mr. Shun caught us sneaking around and made us copy out the entire disciples' rules by hand. Tara's voice softened with nostalgia, then sharpened again. Why are you asking? The night before my father got sick, he said something to me. Iris stared out at the dark night. He said, if something ever happened to him, I should go to the study and find something in a hidden compartment. What kind of something? He never got to tell me. He collapsed before he could explain. Iris's voice was barely a whisper. I've been avoiding it for 3 years. I couldn't go back to the old house. Couldn't open that door. Couldn't even think about the day I found him on the floor. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. But running doesn't fix anything. Tara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said softly, Iris, whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. All the way. After they hung up, Iris didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, replaying every detail of the day her father had collapsed. 3 years ago. Glenn Shun's company had hit a liquidity crisis, banks pulling their lines of credit one after another. He'd barely slept for weeks. That morning, his face had been haggard, but his eyes were bright, the look of a man who'd made up his mind. I'm stepping out for a while, Iris. I'll have something to tell you when I get back. He'd shrugged on his coat, then turned at the door and looked at her with an expression she hadn't understood then. Don't worry. Your father has a plan. That look, steady, sharp, with a hint of something almost mischievous. Glenn Shun had a nickname in his younger days, the Fox. He kept a low profile, but his instincts were razor sharp. He'd built the Shun group from nothing in less than 20 years. It was only the perfect storm, an industry downturn, a partner's betrayal, that had brought it crashing down. But that same storm had planted a seed in Iris's mind. Her father had left her something more than debt and a broken marriage. She was sure of it now. By the time she surfaced from the memory, the sky outside was turning pale blue. Something else surfaced too, a fragment of a conversation. Her mother had mentioned it once, in passing, after her father was hospitalized. There were strangers hanging around the house the week before your father got sick. He told me not to worry about it and to stay inside. At the time, Iris hadn't thought twice about it. Now the detail landed like a cold stone in her stomach. What if those strangers had been sent by the Lius? What if her father had been trying to give her something, but someone had been watching? Iris shivered. She understood now why her father's letter had said, "Don't let anyone know." It wasn't that he hadn't wanted to give her what he'd hidden. It was that he'd never had the chance. The 3-year delay hadn't been his oversight. It had been an interruption, a trap that had snapped shut before he could finish what he'd started. Early the next morning, Iris dressed in simple clothes and drove alone to the Shun family home. The old house sat in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of the city. After Glenn's collapse, Iris's mother had moved with him to a care facility. The house had sat empty for 3 years. The iron gate groaned when Iris pushed it open. The courtyard was overgrown, autumn leaves skittering across the flagstones. Iris stood in the middle of the yard, looking up at the house that had been her home for 20 years. Her eyes burned. She unlocked the front door. The smell of dust and closed air hit her. Furniture stood draped in white sheets like a row of silent ghosts. She didn't linger. She went straight upstairs. The study door was slightly ajar. 3 years ago, she'd found her father collapsed in that doorway, his lips blue, a slip of paper clutched in his hand. He'd survived the ICU, but he'd never regained full consciousness. And the paper, she'd given it to her mother, who'd said it was just a jumble of letters and numbers. Nonsense. The paper had disappeared after that. Iris stood in the threshold, drew a long breath, and stepped inside. The study was exactly as she remembered. The enormous rosewood desk by the window. The floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 2 walls, crammed with volumes and files. And there, on the desk, the copy of Ziji Tongjian her father had been reading when he collapsed. The pages had yellowed. "Hidden compartment," Iris murmured. She started searching. Behind the bookshelves. Beneath the floorboards. In the desk drawers. 3 full hours, every inch of the room. Nothing. No hidden compartment. No secret panel. Nothing. She sank into her father's chair, exhaustion washing over her. Maybe there'd never been any hidden compartment. Maybe he'd been confused. Maybe it had all been fever talk. She laid her head on the desk, her eyes wandering across the open pages of the Ziji Tongjian. Rows of archaic text swam before her eyes. Then something caught her attention, a line of numbers, written in pencil along the edge of a page. Faint. Almost invisible against the yellowed paper. Her father's handwriting. Iris sat bolt upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. She turned to the first page. Then the second. Page after page, every few leaves, there was another pencil notation. Numbers. Letters. Strings that made no sense on their own. She copied them all onto a single sheet of paper, pieced them together, and stared at the result. Not nonsense. Coordinates and a passcode. The coordinates led to a private safe deposit company in the south of the city. Iris grabbed the paper and ran. 2 hours later, she stood in the underground vault of that company, staring at a row of steel safe deposit boxes, her palms slick with sweat. The attendant verified her ID and fingerprints. A heavy drawer slid open. Inside was a single cream envelope, thin, light, sealed with wax. The seal bore the Shun family crest, a flying swan. Iris broke the wax. Inside were 2 things, a letter, and a key. The letter was written in her father's hand, fine brushwork, the careful upright script of a man who'd been taught calligraphy as a child. Iris. If you're reading this, I'm probably no longer in a position to tell you what you need to know. The first sentence blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them with her sleeve and forced herself to continue. In business, I've made enemies and I've made real friends. You used to ask me why all your friends' fathers drove Mercedes and BMWs while I drove an old Santana. I told you it was about keeping a low profile. You didn't believe me, you thought I wasn't successful. But what I was really trying to teach you is this: never let anyone see your real hand. 17 Emerald Lake Drive, South Villa District. Basement level 2. Use the key I've given you to open the door. What you'll find there is what I've set aside for you. Remember, tell no one. Not even the Lus. You'll ask why I didn't use whatever's there to save the company 3 years ago. Because it was never for crises. It was always for you, for the long road ahead. I can't walk that road with you, but I can at least leave you a way back if you ever need one. And about the marriage to the Lus. When old Mr. Lu and I made the engagement agreement, I added a condition he never mentioned to his grandson. 15% of Lu Group shares were transferred to the Shen family as a betrothal gift. The catch, and James doesn't know this, is that the transfer was conditional on the marriage lasting 5 years. If James files for divorce before that term is up, those shares revert to you personally. The original of that agreement is in a safe deposit box at the Central Notary's office. There's a copy in the file cabinet at Emerald Lake. Don't be angry with me for calculating so carefully. Business is war. I just never wanted my daughter to be someone else's casualty. The letter ended with his signature and a date, the day before his collapse. Iris pressed the letter to her chest, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. He'd seen it all coming. The Shen Group's fall. The Lu's intervention. The hollow marriage. He hadn't stopped it because he'd needed the Lu Group's money to keep the family's foundation from crumbling. But he'd planted a seed that would grow into a shield for her when she needed one most. Iris dried her face and closed her fingers around the key. She drove to Emerald Lake Drive that same afternoon. The South Villa district had been built in the 1990s, leafy and quiet. Number 17 was a modest 3-story house, its exterior draped in ivy, clearly untouched for years. Iris pushed through the gate, crossed the mossy flagstones, and let herself in. The entrance to the basement level was hidden behind an old cabinet in the kitchen. She moved the cabinet aside, revealing a heavy iron door. The key turned in the lock with a crisp click. The door swung open. Lights flickered on automatically, illuminating a space of about 50 square meters. Iris stood frozen in the doorway. The room was stacked floor to ceiling with boxes, cardboard archive boxes, each labeled by year and project. There were hundreds of them. She pulled out the nearest box and lifted the lid. Inside, documents. Contract copies. Bank statements. Email printouts. Handwritten memos from key figures. Every piece of it was connected to a Lu Group deal from a decade ago. Another box. This one held ledgers for a company owned by Mandy Zhou's father, Kenneth Zhou. Suspicious fund transfers circled in red pen, with her father's notes in the margins, related party transactions. Suspected value transfer. Another box. A land auction from 20 years ago, Owen Lu, James's uncle, implicated in bid rigging. A complete paper trail. Even meeting minutes. Iris's hands began to shake. This wasn't just a personal archive. It was an intelligence repository, 20 years worth of information on the power players of this city's business elite. Every box held secrets that could destroy careers. Families. Lives. Her father, Glenn Shen, the unassuming old man in the beat-up Santana with the perpetual smile, had been building this colossus in the shadows for 2 decades. Now she understood why he'd lived so quietly. He'd known too much. Far too much. He'd needed to seem harmless. She sat on the basement floor for hours, going through box after box. The deeper she dug, the more stunned she became. James Lu had married a woman he thought was the last of a fallen house. He had no idea that this woman's father had held the Lu family's secrets in his hands for years. But beneath the shock, another feeling surfaced, darker, more complicated. What if she'd never found this place? What if she'd signed those papers, taken the money, walked away? Would this whole room have stayed buried forever? Her father had given her a winning hand. It had taken her 3 years to even know it existed. She tightened her grip on the box in her hands, her knuckles white. For the first time, she understood the other meaning behind her father's words: never let anyone see your real hand. The real hand works best when no one knows it's there. And among all those secrets, one stood out. A single box labeled with James Liu's name. A date in the margin, 5 years ago. Last summer. Iris opened it. Her eyes went wide at the first page. A traffic accident report. July 14, 5 years ago. A black Mercedes had collided with a truck on the coastal expressway. The Mercedes driver had died on the scene. The official investigation had blamed the truck driver. The case had been closed with compensation paid. But there was more in the box. Scene photos. A private investigator's report. A transcript from the Mercedes's dashcam memory, salvaged and translated into text. Iris read everything. Her fingers had gone cold by the time she finished. So this was James Liu's hidden piece. She resealed the box and put it back where she'd found it. Then she walked slowly around the basement, looking at all those stacked boxes, all those lives and secrets she now held in her hands. It was like reading another history of this city. When Iris got home that night, it was almost 11. James was sitting on the living room sofa. An ashtray beside him held several spent cigarettes. He rarely smoked at home. He'd been waiting for her. "Where were you?" He looked up at her, his eyes dark. "I went back to the old house." True, as far as it went. James studied her for a few seconds, weighing her words. Then he stood and picked up a document from the coffee table. "I was going to wait for the right moment to bring this up. But since you seem to know something's coming, we might as well do it now." Iris glanced at the cover, divorce agreement. Her stomach dropped, but her face stayed calm. She took the document and opened it. Her eyes ran over the dense legal text. Simple and brutal. She would waive all rights to marital property. She would waive all claims against the Liu Group. She would vacate the current residence within 30 days. In exchange, James would pay her $5 million from his personal accounts. Then the supplement. James would take over the Shen Group as its primary creditor. Every share held by the Shen family would be transferred to him to settle the $30 million loan and the accumulated interest, close to $10 million over 3 years. In other words, after the divorce, she'd have nothing. And what remained of the Shen family's foundation would belong to James Liu. Iris flipped through every page. A thin smile tugged at her lips. $5 million. James, you're so generous. James looked at her blankly. The legal team came up with that number. It's fair. You've been out of the workforce for 3 years. $5 million is enough to start over. And the Shen Group shares. Iris met his eyes. We signed a supplementary agreement when you made that loan. If the marriage continues for. That supplement has legal problems. James cut her off. His voice was flat, clinical. I've consulted lawyers. A court would likely strike it down. It's better to settle this without litigation. Clean break. Clean start. Iris stared at his expressionless face. A laugh bubbled up somewhere inside her, a dark, hollow laugh. Clean start. Had he thought about the Shen family? Had he thought about his new ex-wife being thrown out onto the street with nothing? What if I refuse? She asked. Then we go to court. Still calm. Iris, I don't want to make this ugly. But you have to face facts. With the Shen Group's current condition, you don't have much leverage. Iris was silent for a long time. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, counting down something. Outside, moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, spilling cold white across the floor. I need time to think, she said at last. 3 days. James turned and walked upstairs without another look. Iris stood alone in the cavernous living room, the agreement crushed in her hands, her knuckles white. She looked down at James's signature, sharp, decisive, efficient. Like the man himself. She let out a soft laugh, the sound hollow in the silence. James, you think you're playing a game you've already won. She spoke to the empty room. But you don't know that someone else has been setting the board all along. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Tara, get me the best divorce lawyer in town. And find me an investigative journalist at the Financial Weekly. I have something they'll want to see. Tara's response came in under 30 seconds. What did you just say? Iris typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, then sent 2 words, I woke up. The next 72 hours, Iris barely slept. She moved through them like a machine, precise and relentless. First, Michelle Song, the most formidable divorce attorney in the city. Mid-50s, 30 years of practice, untouchable in cases that crossed between family and corporate law. Her fees were astronomical. Iris didn't flinch. Ms. Shen, I need to be candid with you, Michelle said after reviewing James's draft agreement. She pushed her glasses up her nose. The Liu Group's legal team is top tier. And given your current financial position, money isn't an issue. Iris cut her off. I have one question. Go ahead. If I can prove that James concealed something significant, something that would have affected my decision to marry him, can this agreement be overturned? Michelle's eyes sharpened. What kind of significant fact? Iris placed a manila folder on the desk. Michelle opened it. Read. Her expression moved from professional neutrality to shock, then settled into a long, meaningful silence. Ms. Shen. She closed the folder, exhaling slowly. Where did you get these? Through legal means. Short. Firm. Michelle stared at her for a moment. Then she laughed. James has no idea who he married, does he? Not really. Iris's smile was cold. The next 2 days, she locked herself in the Emerald Lake basement and sorted through every document her father had left. She divided them into 3 categories: what would destroy James personally, what would bring down the Liu Group and its partners, and what could be used to threaten or expose any of 17 other major players in the city's business network. She didn't need to destroy all of them. She just needed James to know that she could. On the morning of the 3rd day, she met with Ryan Lin, an investigative journalist at the Financial Weekly. He had a reputation as a troublemaker. His reports had taken down 4 listed companies, shaving billions off their valuations overnight. He'd received Iris's message expecting a routine divorce gossip tip. Then he saw her documents. Can you vouch for the authenticity of these? He set the folder down, his eyes burning. I swear by my father's name, Iris said. I can provide original materials if needed. Ryan sat in silence for a long time. Then he took out a recorder and placed it on the table. Ms. Shen, are you sure about this? Once I run this story, there's no going back with the Liu family. The divorce agreement James gave me left me no room to go back either. Iris's voice was soft but steady. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for fairness. Ryan hit record. All right. Let's start. 3 days after the meeting, Iris called James. I'm ready. Can we meet at your office tomorrow at 10? A pause on the other end, then his usual calm, fine. Bring the signed agreement. Iris hung up and looked at the folders on her desk. One held James's original agreement, unsigned. The others contained copies of the most damaging documents from the basement archive. Each one a weapon. She packed them into her bag, then reached into her closet for a suit she'd never worn, a gift from her father, meant for her first day at a real job. Tomorrow, she would stand before James as a new person. Not Mrs. James Liu. Glen Shen's daughter. A woman with cards in her hand and a mind in her head. At 9:50 the next morning, Iris parked in front of the Liu Group headquarters. She wore a razor-sharp black suit and heels that brought her to 8 centimeters. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. Every line of her was precise, deliberate, powerful, a stark contrast to the silent, shrinking wife she'd been for 3 years. She walked through the lobby. The receptionist saw her and started to say, "Mrs. Liu," then caught herself. Iris gave her a brief smile and headed for the elevator. At the top floor, James's assistant rose. "Ms. Shen. Mr. Liu is expecting you." "Thank you." Iris nodded and pushed through the door. James sat behind his massive desk, crisp and composed. Beside him were 2 others, the Liu Group's chief legal officer, Mr. Chen, and Mandy Zhou. Iris's eyes flicked to Mandy for a fraction of a second. No emotion showed on her face. James had brought 2 people to flank him. One for legal support. One, probably, for intimidation. Miscalculation. "Did you bring the agreement?" James got straight to business. Iris settled onto the sofa without hurrying, placing her bag on the coffee table. "I did. But before we sign anything, I have a few questions for Mr. Chen." Mr. Chen inclined his head. "Go ahead." "Under Article 1092 of the Civil Code," Iris said, her voice calm and measured, "if one spouse conceals, transfers, or destroys marital property, or fabricates marital debts to dispossess the other spouse, that spouse may receive less or nothing in a divorce settlement. My question is, if I have evidence that the other spouse concealed a material fact before the marriage, something that would have affected my decision to marry, does that affect the validity of a divorce agreement?" Mr. Chen's professional composure flickered. "That depends on the nature of the evidence. Let me ask another question." Iris drew a document from her bag and placed it on the table. If one party was involved in a hit-and-run traffic fatality before the marriage and used family connections to bury the case, would that constitute a concealed material fact? The air in the office went dead. James's face drained of color, then flushed, then settled into a mask of controlled shock. His fingers whitened on the armrest of his chair. "What did you say?" His voice came out low, tight. Iris didn't answer. She laid out document after document on the table. July 14th, 5 years ago. Coastal Expressway. A black Mercedes crashed into a barrier and caught fire. The driver died at the scene. Her tone was flat, emotionless. But the registered owner of that car wasn't the driver. The real owner got out 10 minutes before the crash. He left his friend behind the wheel. After the crash, he didn't call the police. He didn't call for help. He vanished. By the next morning, the Liu Group's legal team had stepped in. They had the case sealed, for privacy reasons. The victim's family was paid off. The case was closed with a truck driver taking full blame. That driver is still serving time. Iris raised her eyes to James's ashen face. "The real owner was you. James Liu. 5 years ago, you were driving drunk. You let your friend take the wheel. The car crashed. Your friend died. And instead of taking responsibility, you and the Liu family framed an innocent man. That's slander." Mandy shot to her feet, red-faced. "Iris, do you understand what you're saying? Am I wrong?" Iris turned to her. "Your father Kenneth was involved in covering this up. I have the compensation transfers, the forged confession, and the internal police department memo from the time. Need me to lay them all out?" Mandy's lips went white. She sat back down, trembling. Mr. Chen was already skimming the documents on the table. His professional demeanor had cracked. Sweat beaded on his forehead. If even half of this was real, James wasn't just facing a moral reckoning. He was looking at criminal prosecution. The silence in the office stretched. James didn't speak. His hands were clasped on the desk, knuckles white. His eyes were fixed on the documents, pupils contracting. Finally, he said something. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the cold edge of a blade being drawn. "So this is what you've been doing these past 3 days." Iris met his gaze. "You gave me 3 days to think. I used them to really get to know my husband." A grimace twisted at the corner of James's mouth. "Iris, do you realize what you're holding? What can you do to me?" Iris cut him off, her voice calm as still water. "Have me disappear. Have your people arrange another accident. James, did you think I'd be stupid enough not to make backups? If anything happens to me, within 24 hours, everything about your little car accident goes straight to the police, the city prosecutor's office, and 3 major newsrooms." James's pupils contracted sharply. Iris saw the flicker of something behind his eyes, fear, maybe, or just calculation. A sad thought pushed through, she'd believed he was only cold. Now she saw that underneath the ice was something far uglier. She pushed the thought down. It took 3 seconds. By the time she spoke again, her voice was even steadier. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to negotiate. But you need to understand one thing, the woman sitting across from you is no longer the one you could push around." Another long silence. James's breathing had grown heavier. He was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. Because he hadn't, not really. 3 years, and he'd never once tried. At last, James unclenched his fists and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "What do you want?" Iris smiled, small, precise, satisfied. "I want to renegotiate." She opened the divorce agreement and pointed to the first clause. 1. Marital property divided equally under the law. All real estate, vehicles, and financial assets acquired during the marriage. Half of it is mine. 2. The Shen Group's shares stay with me. Your 30 million is not a loan, it was a conditional gift, tied to the marriage lasting 5 years. Since you're the one filing early, you don't get to take it back. I have the original agreement at the notary's office. Mr. Chen is welcome to verify. Mr. Chen's face had gone pale. He clearly hadn't known about that document. 3. Iris's voice dropped, but every syllable landed like a nail in James's chest. About your accident case, I won't make it public. Not for you. But for that truck driver. He's got 3 years left in prison. When he gets out, he deserves to know the truth. But you owe me an apology, James. She looked him in the eye. Not for wanting a divorce. You never loved me. I know that. You owe me an apology for the last 3 years. For treating me like a piece of furniture. For using the marriage to get what you wanted from my family, while keeping another woman close and planning to throw me out with pocket change. James, I'm not angry that you stopped loving me, you never started. I'm angry that you never saw me as human. James stared at her, frozen. The clock on the wall ticked. Mandy opened her mouth, caught Iris's gaze, and closed it again. Then Mr. Chen's phone rang. He looked at the screen, turned pale, and walked to the window to take the call in a low voice. Minutes later, he turned back. His face was ashen. Mr. Liu. We have a problem. His voice was barely audible in the quiet room. The Financial Weekly just published a feature. It's titled, The Hidden Corners of the Liu Empire. James whipped his head toward Iris. Iris's face remained serene, as though everything was unfolding exactly as she'd planned. One more thing, she said, standing. She looked down at James from her full height. Those documents you've seen. They're not all I have. She pulled a USB drive from her bag and set it on the table. This has records of the Lu Group's tax evasion over the past decade. Over 1.2 billion yuan. Ironclad evidence of Owen Lu's land auction manipulation. Your board members' insider trading transactions. And 17 core companies in the city's business association. Profit inflation. Related party transactions. Environmental violations. Safety violations. All documented. I've sent copies to the securities regulator, the tax bureau, and the Environmental Protection Agency. James, you thought you were negotiating with an abandoned wife from a failed family. I'm telling you now, you've been negotiating with Glenn Shen's daughter. My father spent 20 years building this archive. It's enough to reshuffle half the business establishment of this city. Today, I've only opened the first drawer. She picked up the USB drive and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. Send me a revised divorce agreement. A fair one. You have 3 days. Next time, it won't be just one Financial Weekly article. The door closed behind her. James sat alone in his office. The divorce agreement was still spread across his desk. His signature stared back at him, a ghost of his own arrogance. He lit a cigarette and inhaled, watching the smoke drift. In the haze, he saw something else, a memory. The first time he'd met Iris. She'd been standing in the Shen family's living room in a white dress, her eyes clear and gentle. She'd looked like a simple girl. A quiet girl. A suitable wife. 3 years, he'd held that image. Now he knew he'd never seen her at all. His phone began to vibrate on the desk. Owen Lu. He didn't answer. Then Kenneth Shou. Then board members, one after another. Then the PR director. The calls piled up like a wall of alarms. He let them ring. He sat there, smoking, replaying her final words. You owe me an apology. Yes. He did. For 3 years. Mandy had lingered in the corner of the office, frozen in place. After Iris left, she rushed to James's desk. James, she mentioned my father. She knows about Kenneth. If those documents come out. James finally looked up at her. The expression on his face made her take half a step backward. She'd never seen him look like that, cold as a blade. Your father. His voice was flat. You sat here today expecting to watch me destroy her. How did that work out? Mandy's mouth opened and closed. I didn't think. There's a lot you didn't think about. James stubbed out his cigarette, moving slowly, deliberately. Go. Handle your own department. I have other calls to make. Mandy left. In the corridor outside, she leaned against the wall, her legs weak. She scrolled through the Financial Weekly article on her phone. A single paragraph mentioned her father's company, related party transactions, and value diversion linked to Kenneth Shou's name. Just a paragraph. She knew it was only the beginning. Iris Shen had more. Much more. For the first time in her life, Mandy tasted genuine fear. Iris stepped out of the Lu Group building. Sunlight washed over her, bright, golden, warm. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of osmanthus. 3 years of weight, cracking loose. Her phone buzzed. Tara. Are you kidding me? Tara's voice could have cracked the speaker. I just saw the Financial Weekly push notification. Did you? Don't be dramatic. I just gave them some material. The writing's all theirs. Iris walked toward the parking lot, phone to her ear. Some material. You dug up Owen Lu's bones from 20 years ago. The comments section is on fire, the Lu Group stock is already falling. Iris slid into the driver's seat. I know. Silence. Then Tara's voice exploded into laughter. Iris, you absolute legend. I spent 3 years watching you take his crap and you had this in your pocket the whole time. Your father would be so proud. Iris smiled, a small, genuine smile. She started the car. This was just the beginning, she didn't say. 3 days later, James's legal team delivered a completely revised agreement. Iris reviewed it line by line with Michelle. This time, the terms were a full retreat. Marital property split 50-50. 3 properties and a substantial cash settlement. The Shen Group's shares were hers outright. The 30 million was reconfirmed as a gift, not a loan. And one more thing, a commercial property in the east of the city, transferred to Iris at a symbolic 1 yuan. He's trying to make amends, Michelle said. What you're holding makes him very uncomfortable. Iris read the agreement twice, then signed her name at the bottom. That's it, she said. We're done. Michelle raised an eyebrow. You know, with what you have, you could have asked for a lot more. James's case alone. I know. Iris set down the pen. But my father didn't collect these documents for blackmail. He collected them for protection. If I start using them to maximize my payday, how am I any different from the people he feared? Michelle studied her for a long moment. Then nodded slowly. You're even more remarkable than your father thought you'd be. Iris smiled but didn't reply. The divorce was finalized within a week. 7 days after signing, Iris stood at the door of the civil registry office, a dark red booklet in her hand. 3 years ago, on a different autumn day, she'd walked out of another office in white, saying, "I do," to a man who'd never really wanted her. She'd been so hopeful then, not for love, but for something like decency. Something like respect. She'd been wrong. But she didn't need anyone's respect anymore. She'd earned her own. Ms. Shen. She turned. James stood a few paces behind her, in a dark gray coat, his face lined with exhaustion. The week since the Financial Weekly article had been brutal. The Securities Bureau had launched an investigation. Board members were restricted from travel. The stock was down by nearly a third. Can I help you? Iris's tone was distant, polite, like a stranger. James hesitated. Can I ask you one thing? Go ahead. These 3 years. Did you hate me? Iris considered the question. No. Hate is too much work. I honestly just pity you. Pity me for what? Because you'll never know what you walked away from. James let out a bitter laugh. Yeah. I walked away from a woman 100 times smarter than I thought. Not just that. Iris met his eyes. You walked away from 3 years of someone who actually cared about you. James, when I married you, I wanted to make it work. She turned and walked to her car without looking back. James stood in the cold wind, watching her taillights disappear into traffic. Autumn leaves skittered around his shoes. He remembered the wedding. Iris in white. Her eyes bright and clear as she said, "I do." Those eyes had been clear because she meant it. He'd drained them dry. That night, Iris sat alone on the balcony of her new apartment. The city glittered before her, endless and alive. A cup of tea warmed her hands. The divorce certificate lay on the coffee table. She looked at it, then looked away. She'd won. The words turned in her mind, but they brought no rush of triumph. A different feeling crept in, a dull, persistent ache. She'd won everything there was to win. Money. Assets. Dignity. Justice. All except one thing. The 3 years. 3 years she should have spent in a classroom, pulling all-nighters in the library, walking campus paths with friends, graduating in a cap and gown. Instead, she'd spent them in silk gowns on James's arm, smiling, silent, invisible. She could never get those years back. Iris finished her tea and set the cup down with a soft clink. She said it aloud to the empty balcony, then let them go. Let those years go. Move forward. She drove back to the Emerald Lake basement one last time. She packed the car accident documents into a large envelope and addressed it to the Municipal Criminal Investigation Division. She packed the tax evasion evidence into another envelope and addressed it to the Tax Bureau. The rest, Kenneth Zhou's related party transactions, Owen Liu's bid rigging, the 17 other companies, she locked into a new safe. They weren't weapons. They were insurance. With them, no one in this city's business circle would dare touch her. Then she drove to the care facility. Glenn Shen was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, watching the autumn leaves fall. His eyes were clouded, his hands trembling. He had good days and bad days. Iris visited every week. But today was different. She knelt beside him and took his thin, trembling hand. "Dad." Slowly, Glenn turned his head. His milky eyes found her face. Something flickered there. "Iris." His voice was a ragged whisper, but she heard her name. "Dad, I got divorced." Her voice was soft. "But I brought the Shen family's things back. Your company is still ours. I'm going to run it. I'm going to take care of it." Glenn's cracked lips moved. A single tear rolled from the corner of his eye and down his cheek. His free hand lifted, trembling, to touch her hair, the same clumsy, tender gesture he'd made when she was a child and had come home with straight A's. "Good, good." He repeated the word, his lined face blooming into a smile. Iris laid her head on his knees and wept. 1 month later, Iris took control of the Shen Group. Her first act, restructure the board. The old cronies who'd picked the company apart during her father's illness were swept out. Half the new leadership was drawn from her father's loyalists. The other half was young talent she'd recruited herself. Her management style was nothing like her father's. Glenn had been cautious, quiet, operating from the shadows. Iris was bold and direct. In her first week, she announced a strategic overhaul, pivoting the Shen Group from traditional manufacturing into new energy projects. 3 provincial-level contracts landed within a month. The business world got the message, the Shen daughter was sharper even than the old fox. Across town, the Liu Group wasn't faring nearly as well. The financial weekly report was only the beginning. In the months that followed, the company hemorrhaged. Tax penalties in the hundreds of millions. Plunging stock. Partners pulling out. Banks tightening credit. By the following spring, the Liu Group had entered bankruptcy restructuring. James resigned as chairman. Iris watched the news, then turned off the television and called her legal department. "What's the market value on that commercial property James transferred to me?" "About 80 million. Sell it to the Liu Group's bankruptcy administrators." "Market rate." She paused. "Condition, the proceeds go toward paying back wages and severance to Liu Group employees." A long pause on the other end. "Ms. Shen, that's your personal asset." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." After hanging up, Iris stood at the window of her office, looking out at the city. James had asked her once if she hated him. She'd said no. She'd meant it. But that no wasn't forgiveness. It was letting go. She'd packed those 3 years, the man, the marriage, the lies, into a box labeled expired and thrown it away. Then she'd kept walking. And yet, watching the Liu Group crumble on the news, she felt no satisfaction. Instead, a quiet question rose in her mind: what would have happened if her father hadn't left her that basement? If she'd been a Shen daughter with no hidden hand to play? There was no answer. And maybe she didn't need one. What she'd learned from her father wasn't just about the secrets in those boxes. It was simpler than that, and heavier. You can lose everything, she thought. But if you keep one thing that no one else knows about, you're never truly beaten. The thought brought a chill and a strange, solemn peace. That night, Iris dreamed of her father. He was young again, sitting in his study, turning the pages of that yellowed history text. Without looking up, he said, "Iris, never let anyone see your real hand." In the dream, she was just a child, playing with blocks on the floor, barely hearing his words. Now she understood. At 26, standing on the threshold of her own life, she finally grasped the weight of what he tried to teach her. Outside, the stars stretched across a clear winter sky. Iris switched off her computer, locked her office, and walked down to her car. Tomorrow would bring more work, more meetings, more battles. But tonight, she would sleep. In her own house. On her own pillow. With her own dreams. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Tara. Free this weekend? Dinner on me. To celebrate the new CEO's first month. Iris smiled and typed back, yes. She pulled onto the expressway, the city's lights streaming past like falling stars. In the rearview mirror, the town that had held all her sorrow and all her growing grew smaller, farther, dimmer. The road ahead had never been wider.